Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the first of our Teen Talk online events. You're all very welcome here. We're delighted to have Pat Divilly here with us today. I'll tell you a little bit more about Pat. We've got a great series of speakers lined up. Unfortunately, due to the current crisis, we've had to cancel our Teen Talk events, but it's given us a great opportunity, of course, that we can widen out the content to all of the teenagers, both in County Cork and throughout Ireland. And because of this, we're just widening out the content just to suit everybody as well. We're all in a challenging situation at the moment, so some of the great speakers that we have, will help us during this time. I'm delighted to have Pat Divilly on today. Pat has been an inspiring guy to me for many years. He's a native of Galway. He's an author, speaker, and coach. He's run his own fitness business. He works mainly now in personal development and self-development. So he's written 3 books in his time, and some of the interesting facts about Pat is that he has scaled the highest peaks in Europe, Africa, and South America, and he also has a purple belt in jiu-jitsu. So quite a lot of achievements there. So you're very welcome, Pat. How are you?
I'm good, Niall. Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to get to do this. And yeah, we did this last year with the Teen Talks down in Cork, and I really enjoyed it. And it's a different scenario this year, but hopefully we can share some tools that support anyone who's watching.
Brilliant. And just, can you tell us how are you managing through this whole lockdown, or where are you?
I'm home in Galway, so it's like everyone else, I suppose. It's bringing challenges, but I think it's bringing opportunities as well. So, as you know, my primary work is in speaking and events, and so everything's cancelled on that end. And so it's just a case of pivoting and kind of controlling what's in my control and letting go of the rest. So I'm looking on the positives, get to slow down a little bit, focus on maybe a little bit more exercise and a little bit more study and the things that I don't get to do as much when I'm busy. But yeah, look, it's challenging, and I think there's waves of emotion for us all. There's days where you feel like relaxed and on top of things, and then there's little waves of fear or anxiety, which I think is normal. But for the most part, I'm happy out.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're all in it together, really. So, Pat, you gave some great content last year for our Teen Talk. So, I'm just going to hand over to you for now and let you, speak to pretty much to the teenagers. We'll come back to the adults and the wider audience later on. But what was your message going to be coming across for Teen Talks for this year?
I suppose the big thing I've really focused on, and this applies for teenagers, but I think it applies for us all. And the more I work with people, the more I come to see that we're very similar. We all have the same kind of doubts and fears. They just show up in different ways. And so my kind of primary message is the importance of the way that we speak to ourselves. So I came from a fitness background and worked with a lot of clients, and I was always intrigued with why some of the clients were able to kind of run with the plan and be successful overnight or very quickly. And then others, despite having the same plan and the same support, kind of struggled. And ultimately, I think what it came down to was the way people were talking to themselves. They were either giving themselves a message of support in their minds and telling them what they could achieve, or they were beating themselves up. I think a lot of the time we're our own worst critic. Again, whatever age, whatever background, we tend to judge ourselves. Particularly now with social media and the amount of time that we spend looking outward, we tend to compare ourselves to other people. And of course, we hear it all the time. You'll see someone else's highlight reel, and then you are at home on your own and you feel certain feelings, like you might feel lonely, or you might feel sad, or you might feel like you're not good enough. And you're comparing that internal feeling to what you see externally in someone else. So I think auditing the way that we talk to ourselves is really, really important. Noticing the way that we talk to ourselves, the stories that we tell ourselves. When I think back to when I was a teenager, the big story that I had for 6 years in secondary school was, I'm not academic, I'm not clever, I'm not smart. And that was something I told myself 100 times a day. And generally when we have a thought that we keep repeating, that becomes a belief, that becomes the way we see the world. And when we have a belief, we look for evidence that backs up our belief. It's called confirmation bias. So if I think all people are good in the world, I'll tend to see the good in people. If I think people are bad, I'll see bad in people. So we go out there and we look for things that back up our beliefs. And with that belief of I'm not academic, I'm not clever, I'm not smart, I would look at ways that I was failing. I'd look at the subjects I wasn't good at. I'd ignore the stuff that I was doing well with because it went against my beliefs. And hopefully this kind of starts to show the power of beliefs. Whatever we're telling ourselves all the time will become our reality. And so, an example of that could be, I suppose, what we're experiencing right now with the coronavirus. We're all experiencing a very similar situation externally, but we're all having a different meaning in our mind as to what it means. Some people are seeing it as very stressful. Other people are seeing it as an opportunity. Other people are worrying about, will the exams go ahead and stuff like that. Other people are just thinking, I can only control my study. And so it's the same situation, but we're all telling ourselves different stories about what it means. So I'm really big on that. I think that's the most important thing. To give some examples of that, what I've recognized is that particularly when we're kids, we start to form these beliefs early in life. Things happen and we attach a meaning to what happens, and then that becomes the way we see the world. So an example of that, if I'm 5 or 6 years old and I stand up in school to speak and I'm reading from the book and I stumble over my words and everybody laughs at me, that's something that happens and I'll attach a meaning to it. So probably the meaning I attach is, I'm not very good at reading or public speaking, I shouldn't do that again. And so that becomes a belief. So there's a situation and then I attach a meaning to the situation, and then that's my belief. And that could be something I carry with me for years unless I kind of look at it and recognize that, oh, maybe that's not what really happened. So the story I tell on that was a couple of years ago doing a workshop in Dublin and walking into the bathroom after an hour. And it was an 8-hour workshop. And I saw that somebody had thrown my workbook in the bin. I designed these nice workbooks and I'm 1 hour into 8 hours and my heart sank. And again, something had happened. The meaning I attached was, I'm not a very good speaker. And I went back into the room and I felt kind of nervous and a bit sad. And 8 hours later, at the end of the day, my friend turned to me and he said, you did a great job. And I said, no, I don't think I did. Somebody threw my workbook in the bin. And he laughed at me and he said, I was at the registration desk. One of the girls spilt a cup of coffee on your workbook. And so I put it in the bin. And I thought, wow, sometimes things happen and what we attach as a meaning to it is not true at all. Now, somebody since said to me, your friend only said that to make you feel better. And that could be true too. But when we're stressed, it's because we have a story in our heads about how things should be. If I'm stressed about the way I look, it's because I think I should look different to how I look. So we're comparing ourselves. And so, with all this, I think, from a practical standpoint, anytime anyone's experiencing stress or sadness or difficult emotions, I'd be asking myself, what's the story? What's the narrative in my head right now? How am I talking to myself? I know when I get stressed, the voice in my head is saying, you've taken on too much and you're never going to get it all done. And of course, that's going to give me a feeling. Any story I tell myself gives me a feeling. We all have a response called fight or flight response, which a lot of the students may have heard of. And that's something that is in us for years. It's something that was there to protect us originally. So if a tiger came into the room, you get fight or flight response. It gives you a surge of energy, adrenaline, cortisol, and that gets you up and gets you moving. It's there to protect you. But the world that we live in today, we get that exact same response from our thoughts, from our phones, from things we see on social media that upset us. And so we're always getting this adrenaline and cortisol running through our bodies, and we're always switched on, and we're always kind of high strung. We're always reactive, and that can be challenging. And when we're in that zone, I think we tend to believe our negative stories a bit more. When we're relaxed, we don't believe the negative stuff about ourselves. But when we're tired, and when you look at going off on a bit of a tangent, but when you look at any army in the world, one of the first things the armies will do to test the soldiers is they deprive them of sleep. So they put them into this stress state, and then they put them under stressful situations to see how they react or respond. And so for us, again, if we're very high strung, if we're very switched on, if we're living in our heads, if we're struggling a little bit with sleep because we're overthinking, a lot of us overthink, that's because we're switched on, we're fired up, we're high strung. And I actually went to a psychiatrist a couple of years ago. No shame in saying it. I was struggling a little bit with my mental health. I was achieving a lot of success externally, which anyone looking would say that guy's successful, but I just didn't feel good in myself. And she told me that this fight or flight response was the big problem for me. She said it's like a fire alarm in the house, where if there's a fire in your house and the fire alarm goes, that's really useful. But she said if the fire alarm goes every time you use the toaster, it's a problem. And she said for you, it's the same thing. Your fight or flight response is going every time you have a negative thought, every time you think something about yourself, and you get caught in these loops. And so I started thinking about that, and I said, I need to fix the fire alarm. And there's 2 tools that I use, so hopefully these are useful for anyone listening. The first tool is something called the box breath. We hear a lot about meditation, and the box breath is probably the simplest way of starting with meditation. I set a timer for 5 minutes on my phone, and I draw a box with my breath. So I breathe in for 4 seconds through my nose, and then I hold that breath for 4 seconds, and then I exhale for 4 seconds, and then I hold. So again, I'm drawing a box, 4 seconds in through my nose, 4 second hold, 4 second exhale, 4 second hold. That's as simple as meditation needs to be. I'll do that for 5 minutes. It completely changes the way the way I'm thinking, the way I'm feeling. Anyone who's struggling with overwhelm, anxiety, panic, fear, any of these things, it's a way of getting out of the fire alarm and fixing the fire alarm and not allowing yourself to be high strung all the time. So that's a really useful tool. The breath is something we forget about sometimes, but when you consider times when you're stressed, the first thing someone will say to you is take a deep breath. And it's a reminder that the breath, when it's fast and it's up in our chest, it's because we're overwhelmed. When it's into our belly, it's because we're relaxed. So that simple tool can be useful. And the second tool that's changed my life has been pen and paper. So I have a journal here. It doesn't need to be a journal like this, but I've got all sorts of journals. And what I try to do is write down goals, I write down my priorities, I write down things I'm grateful for. And it gets a lot of the noise that's going on up here, and it just takes it out of my mind and onto paper. And my experience, at least, has been that when I've got a problem in my mind, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger the more I think about it. As soon as I get it on paper, it's almost like a puzzle, and it's a lot more practical. And I start feeling like, in my mind, I'm studying a lot of courses at the moment, and it's funny. I didn't think I was academic in school, and now, what am I, 12 years on, I found stuff I'm really interested in, and it's just changed. When you're studying stuff you really like, it's different. But I could be thinking about how much study I have to do, and when I think about that, it's overwhelming. But when I take out pen and paper and I put out a bit of a plan, I suddenly realize, I just need to do maybe an hour on this, and then an hour on this, and then I can relax. And there's a lot to be said for planning and taking the noise and putting it on paper. A couple of things that might be useful. I don't want to be throwing too much at people, but to keep it really simple, in the morning, I do my 5 minutes of box breathing, and I answer 2 questions. And the 2 questions are, what 3 things am I grateful for? And that's about teaching yourself appreciation. Stress comes when we have expectations that we feel aren't being met. So again, if I think my body doesn't look the way it should look, I've got an expectation. My body should look like what I see on Instagram. But if I can have appreciation, it changes how I feel. So I appreciate the fact that I can walk and I can go to the gym and I'm healthy, and I appreciate, lots of things about my body. So 3 things I'm grateful for. I start my day with that after my box breath. And then I write down, what are my top 3 priorities today? What 3 things need to happen today for it to be a great day? And that's about setting intention. If we don't have intentions and we don't think about what we want, the world just kind of throws whatever it wants at us. And sometimes that's good, sometimes it's bad. But I'll start the morning and I'll say my 3 intentions today. I'm doing this call with Niall, so give my best with that. I want to do a workout later on because I'm trying to do a little bit more training, and I've got another call later on. So that's my 3 primary tasks for the day. Other things will get done, but that gives me focus. It takes away overwhelm. It gives me structure to my day. And structure is really important, particularly in a time like this where there's a lot of uncertainty and we're in unprecedented times. So again, I start the morning, 5 minutes of box breathing, settles myself, 3 things I'm grateful for, and 3 priorities. And then at the end of the day, I'll do my 5 minutes of box breathing again. And it helps me unwind. If I'm in fight or flight, it's very hard to sleep. And that's when we go to bed and we're tired, but we're wired. So we're feeling tired, but our mind is going a million miles an hour. And that box breath, you'll just notice your mind settle. And the last thing I end with in the day is, again, 3 things I'm grateful for and 3 wins for the day. What went well today? And what that's training you to do is, again, a lot of us are our own worst critic. We'll think of all the mistakes or mess ups we made. That's called negativity bias. We'll always go to the negative. That's a protective mechanism. So again, years ago, we talk about the fight or flight response that comes to protect you from the tiger. There's also the negativity bias, which will be if I walk through the woods and I see a stick on the ground, I can think, oh, it's just a stick, but I have to have in the back of my mind that it could be a snake, because if I get bit by this snake, always got to assume the worst. That's how I survive. And so I sometimes tell people our brain is there for survival more than it is there for happiness. And so we need these little tools. So I end the day with, what 3 things did I do well today? And even on the worst day, you should be able to find a few things. It could be that I sat down and studied for 3 hours and it felt like nothing went in, but I'm glad I stayed with it, and I gave myself a chance. So hopefully on some level that can help people. Simple things really. When we're stressed, if I was to sum it up, when we're stressed, we tend to believe our negative thoughts more. Again, think of the soldier who's tired, and everything's more difficult when you're tired. And when you're stressed, you're tired. So the box breath is a simple way of helping ourselves to calm down a little bit. And then the questions are a way of focusing the mind. Again, the mind wants to survive and it just wants to get by. You have to have these little practices and little tools to ensure that you've got a focus in life, that you're getting away from this negativity bias, and that you're challenging things that don't serve you. Maybe the last thing to share for now, something I've learned, the biggest thing I've learned over the years is that real success in life, be it with your exams, be it with your health, be it with your relationships, be it in any area, real success is if you're a little bit better than you were yesterday at something, you're doing well. I spent, I don't know, most of my life, if I'm honest, right up till probably 25, 26, constantly comparing myself to other people. And I failed with businesses because I would look at another business and they'd have 100 clients. So I'd decide I want 100 clients. And I had no clients at the time. I didn't recognize that the journey of 1,000 miles starts with the first step, or whatever the expression is. And the biggest change I've made in recent years has been willing to look silly, willing to look like a failure, willing to make mistakes, willing to just take it one step at a time and put myself out there in anything, take up new skills, take up new ideas, give myself, try things I'm not good at, and not feel the need to be as good as anyone else, just feel the need to be a little bit better than I was yesterday. And if you do that for long enough with anything, then you become an expert. John Kavanagh, who's the most famous mixed martial arts coach in the world, has got an expression that says you win or you learn. And that would be my philosophy for life now. I either get better at something or I learn how to do it better. If I could go back to 15-year-old, 16-year-old Pat that thought he wasn't academic and thought he wasn't clever and thought he wasn't cool and he thought all these things, I'd be telling him, just focus on little wins every day, focus on what's in your control, and become your own biggest fan rather than being your own biggest critic, because there'll be enough people in life that will tell you can't do things. You have to tell yourself that you can do things, and you can get anywhere you want to be if you're willing to take the little steps every day. And that's not always a sexy plan. That doesn't have shiny lights around it and stuff, but that's what makes change in anything.
That's really good. I mean, I think there's some great messages there, and even just to admit the errors when you make them, and then they're okay. And one that I actually have done since we've started is that I never introduced myself at the beginning of the call, Pat.
I should have done that for you.
But what I meant to say to everybody is who I am, and my name is Niall O'Callaghan. I'm the Healthy Ireland Coordinator with Cork County Council. And these talks are being brought to you with Cork County Council and with Pobble as well through Healthy Ireland. So it's a great initiative that we've had going the last few years. So it's great to be able to bring it online, but obviously we're learning as we go as well. But yeah. Pat, you had some great messages there. You had some great messages for teens and what you would or what you advise to yourself if you were a teenager. And I think even from listening to myself over the years that the message doesn't really change as we get older. Would you agree with that? Or, if we're widening out this content here to adults and to people of all ages, can we do the same things at all ages, and particularly during this time when people might be, feeling a bit challenged under the current circumstances?
Yeah, I think it applies across the board. And I think, if we can, there's a lot of things we do as teens that if we could hold on to those things throughout our lives, I think it will be really beneficial. So something I've been thinking about recently is there's two kind of conflicting forces for us all in life. The first one is we've all got dreams and hopes and aspirations and a person we want to become. And then on the flip side, we all want to feel a sense of belonging. We want to fit in. And sometimes those two things don't go together, because I think if I become who I really want to be, what will people think of me? And so these two things start to come together, and I become more obsessed by what other people think of me and fitting in and not standing out and not being called out. And that's my main focus. And then as I get a bit older, at least for me, you can start to lose yourself a bit. You start losing the hobbies. You're not as active with your social life in terms of going out and trying new things and meeting new people. And work for a lot of us can become all consuming as we get a bit older. So I think the messages remain largely the same, but I would, big thing I went back to a couple of years ago was jiu-jitsu, as you mentioned. That was something where woke up at 27 having achieved a lot in business and was going a million miles an hour and everything looked great, but just didn't feel good day to day. And I thought, when was I at my happiest if I was to look back? And one of the things was when I was a teenager, I had no money, but I did martial arts and it just made me happy day to day. And so it was very obvious to me to take up a hobby at that point that gave me a social outlet, that gave me a physical outlet, that ticked a lot of boxes. So I think for the adults, it's worth considering that you're never too young or too old to reinvent yourself and to try new things. And I think a lot of the time when we're adults, we do things to tick the box or to achieve something. And it's good to have things in your life as well that are just there to do it for the sake of doing it. Kids play, the kids play, and they don't need to win all the time. They just do it to pass the time and to have fun. And then as we get older, we get competitive and we've got bills to pay and we've got this to do and to-do lists. It's great to have an hour in the week, if at least, where you do some art or do some music or do something and take the expectations away from yourself as to having to get anywhere, and just allow yourself to, as they say, we're human beings, we're not human doings, but we get caught up in a lot of doing. So I think, similar ideas, look after your internal dialogue, slow down a little bit with that box breath or some form of meditation, and try to put something in your life that is inspiring to you. I run, I did a lot of men's work recently, which is like personal development days for men, where 100 men come out and we talk about stuff, because men aren't as good at talking about things traditionally as women. And so we'll come together in groups and we'll talk about our struggles. And a big thing I'm seeing is that whole narrative of, I've worked hard and I've made a lot of money, but I've lost myself a little bit. I'm not quite sure who I am anymore. And that's down to having hobbies, having interests, allowing yourself to try new things, just creating a bit of space for yourself. I've seen it with my own parents in recent years. They give up everything for us when we were kids to look out for us and to look after us and to make us the priority. But me seeing them take up hobbies in the last 3-4 years has been really inspiring for me. So I think, for the adults, the parents, don't feel selfish for doing things for yourself. You lead through your actions. And when your kids see you doing things and challenging yourself and, putting yourself out there, that's as inspiring to them as anything else. And that's a really important message for them.
That's really good. It's very refreshing to hear that it's never too late. I think it's always good to hear that. So Pat, thanks so much for that. We've invited some questions as well from the public, and anybody can send in a question to teentalks@corkcoco.ie, and we're giving certain questions to a number of our speakers. So I'll go through the rest of our speakers at the end. But one question that we have coming in, Pat, and you touched on it a little bit during your initial piece there, and this is from Sarah in Bantry, who's saying that I'm starting to feel a bit stressed about my leaving cert and the uncertainty about it. What can I do to help me stay focused and prepare well while dealing with the uncertainty of it all?
Yeah, it's a huge challenge for people, and I think it's a huge lesson as well, because there's the idea as you go throughout your life that there's certain things in your control and there's other things that aren't. And when people get stressed in life, a lot of the time they're getting caught up in things they can't control and they're losing focus on what they can. So as an example, if I'm to spend my life reading the newspapers and scrolling the social media feeds and being told how the world is, and I've no control over that stuff, that can be very stressful. And I can spend my whole life looking outward and trying to change what's out there. But really, all I can control is myself. So as I say, like yourself, like us all, my lifestyle has changed these last couple of weeks, but I recognize I'm in control of my health. I'm in control of looking after my mind. I'm in control. I'm just focused on that stuff. So for the students, it's not easy, but my big encouragement will be recognize that what's in your control. So how much you study, how focused you are with that, how much of a plan you have, how well you're looking after yourself and allowing yourself to switch off. It is stressful to think that the exams may or may not happen, but you got to think every minute you spend putting attention on that is a minute that's taken away from either you relaxing and looking after yourself, or you doing the study and doing the work. So oftentimes we've no control over the results. It's kind of like a sports team. We train at our hardest and we hope for the best, but we don't know what we're going to come up against on the day. But we know that we're coming in as prepared as we can be. I think if people can take that approach and let go of the outcome, let go of the results. I can't know what's going to happen, but I can know that I've done everything to be as prepared as possible. And every goal, and the Leaving Cert, whether we'd like it to be a goal or not, has to be a goal for us all because it's something we're doing. Every goal is really about who you become as opposed to the actual goal. So the day you finish your Leaving Cert and you walk out, life goes on. It's not the end of the world. Whatever happens, it's not the end of the world. So the next day you're still who you are. But what you don't lose is who you became on the journey. So the study that I do, the work that I do, the discipline that I have, the motivation all these things that I put into practice for the coming weeks and months, I'll keep that irrespective of whether the exams happen or not. And so, my big encouragement again for the parents, for anyone listening, is fast forward 2 months in your mind and have a conversation with yourself and ask, what did I just do with the last 2 months? Did I panic and worry and live in fear and overwhelm, thinking what's going to happen next? Or did I just accept this is what's happening and I'm going to do my best? And, even if things don't go exactly as I think they should in my mind, I'll have prepared as best I can and I'll be the better for it.
That's really good. And that's what I was going to mention to you as well, in terms of parents as well, of how they might be able to support their teenagers, those who are, possibly heading into Leaving Cert as well. But is it the fact that they should be looking after themselves and being good role models and controlling their own controllables so that they can be that example to the teenagers as well?
I think hopefully it's in context and it's not out of context, but I think the most important thing for us all in relationships is to ask more questions rather than make statements. So rather than tell anyone what they should be doing, or rather than preaching at the teenagers, you should be asking them questions. How are you feeling? Is there anything I can support you with? Allow them to kind of express themselves rather than there's this idea of seek first to understand, then to be understood. And what that means is I can go into a conversation with a picture in my mind of what I'm going to say. I'm going to tell my kid that they need to do this, 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 and this. But I haven't understood where they're coming from yet. And so that's the important part of any communication. I want to sit with the person I'm talking to or I'm supporting, find out where they're at, and then I come up with how I can help them or how I can. So I think that's important. Seek first to understand them and understand their stresses and their concerns and their worries, and then respond with how can I help you? How can I support you? The challenging time for us all, and we got to just be a bit more compassionate with ourselves. Something I've been telling people that might be a good side note is, as we experience a lot of stress in any time of life, particularly now, I compare it to, imagine a bath with lots of different faucets, and you turn them all on. The stress in school and the stress at home, and there's lots of different stresses. If there's no drain in the bath, eventually the bath overflows. And in the same way, if we experience a lot of stress and we've no way of getting rid of the stress, be it through exercise or meditation, that's going to overflow at some stage. And the way it tends to overflow is we take it out on someone else. And so it's good to have that little bit of compassion and a bit more patience for each other. If someone's a little bit snappy or a little bit moody at home, give them don't turn into World War III. Give them the kind of credit that they're struggling a little bit. Encourage them to do their box breath.
That's really good, Pat. Thanks so much for that. I'm definitely going to be doing my box breath in the morning anyway. That's for sure. Listen, on behalf of Cork County Council and Healthy Ireland and Pobble and our LCDC in Cork, I'd like to thank you very much for that great bit of advice. There's lots of really valuable bits there, and I'm sure everybody will take something from that, especially in the time that we're in. And we'd like to wish you the best of luck through the rest of this as well, and hope everything gets back up and running fully for you as well very shortly. And thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you.